A boss be rising, BBTV's igniting, turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited, from the gravel road to the neon dream, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling, when she hits go live, everybody feels it.
All right, y'all, welcome back. It's Jukebox Journey night, and tonight we're doing something a little special because it's Women's History Month. And, I am a woman after all, a bee, but a woman. That gives us the perfect excuse to talk about some of the women who didn't just participate in rock music, they helped shape it. Now, when people talk about rock history, okay, the conversation often jumps straight to the big bands and legendary guitar heroes, right? But the truth is that some of the most powerful moments in rock. Uh-oh. Sorry, I guess I'm having a little issue. Hello, Chris. Hello. Thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening too. I appreciate that. Oh, pardon me. So, they refused to let anyone define who they were supposed to be. And the thing I love about tonight's stories is that these songs didn't just become hits because they were catchy. They became hits because they came from real emotion, real conflict, and sometimes real anger. So, because sometimes the best music, it happens when life gets messy, right? And if y'all know anything about my daytime show, y'all know I like the messy. So, breakups happen, rumors spread, the industry tries to control the narrative, and instead of backing down, these artists, they turn those moments into songs that are still being played decades later. So, tonight we're looking at 6 women of rock whose music came from moments that were deeply personal, sometimes dramatic, and sometimes straight up rebellious. We're talking about songs that didn't just make the charts, they told a story about the people behind them. So, as we go through these tonight, I want you to think about something. When a song comes from a real moment in someone's life, heartbreak, frustration, anger, determination, does that make the music stronger? Because I think it does. I think the songs that last the longest are the ones you can hear the truth behind the performance. And y'all know what time it is, okay? Story time, buzzing with B. So let's start with one of the most famous moments in rock history where a breakup didn't just happen behind the scenes, it ended up becoming one of the biggest songs of all time. Let me load that right up. All right. Sorry. Okie dokie. So, since it's Women's History Month, we are kicking this thing off with one of the most dramatic situations in rock history. Now, let me paint this picture for you because this one sounds like it should have been a reality show instead of a band, right? Uh-huh. Fleetwood Mac in the middle of 1970s, they were huge. Money rolling in, tours selling out, the album rumors about to be recorded. But behind the scenes, absolute emotional chaos. I'm talking about breakups, divorces, tensions, and people who probably needed a therapist more than a recording studio. So, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham had joined the band together as a couple. They were a musical duo, a romantic couple, and suddenly they were part of one of the biggest rock bands in the world. But by the time Rumors was being recorded, Listen, their relationship was falling apart. And just to make things extra messy, John and Christine McVie were also going through a divorce at the same time. So you've got two relationships inside the band imploding while everybody is still expecting the show up to work every day, and pretend everything is fine. Wow. Now let me ask y'all something real quick because I think you're going to understand this. Have any of you ever had to work with an ex? Not just see them occasionally. I mean, work with them every single day because that is already awkward enough, right? So imagine writing a song about the breakup and then having to perform it in front of millions of people with that person standing right across the stage from you. That's exactly what Stevie Nicks did when she wrote Dreams. And those lyrics are not subtle. They're not. Stevie was basically sat down and said, all right, if I'm going to put my emotions into this music, then we're going to do it honestly. Players only love you when they're playing. Now, you don't have to be a rock historian to realize that line is probably aimed directly at someone. Think about it. And yes, that someone was Lindsey Buckingham. So imagine being Lindsey, hearing that song for the first time in the studio. It's about you. Everyone else in the room knows it's about you. And now the entire world is about to hear it too. Yeah. But here's where the story gets even more dramatic. Lindsey Buckingham didn't exactly stay quiet either. While Stevie was writing Dreams, Lindsey wrote another song that became one of the band's biggest hits called Go Your Own Way. Yeah. And a lot of people believe that song was his side of the breakup story. So basically, the album Rumors turned into a musical conversation between two people whose relationship had completely fallen apart. Instead of fighting in private, they were arguing through the hit songs. And the crazy part, it worked. Rumors became one of the biggest albums ever recorded. Over 40 million copies sold worldwide. And Dreams, wow, became Fleetwood Mac's only number one song in the United States. So, the song that came out of heartbreak became the biggest hit of the band's entire career. Now, here's the part that always blows my mind, okay, about this whole story. After the album came out, Fleetwood Mac went on tour, which means Stevie and Lindsey had to stand on a stage together every night performing those songs. Their breakup songs. So there they were, thousands of people cheering, the crowd singing along, and Stevie is singing Dreams while Lindsey Buckingham is right across the stage playing the guitar. Pardon me. You know what? Night after night, city after city. At that point, you're not just in a band anymore. You're in the most expensive couples therapy session in rock history. And yet somehow the band survived all of that tension long enough to make one of the greatest albums of all time, which honestly tells you something about Stevie Nicks as an artist. She didn't hide what she was feeling. She put it directly into the music, and that honesty is part of what made her one of the most powerful voices in rock. So let me throw this question out to anyone who would want to offer up an opinion, because I'm curious what y'all think. If you wrote a breakup song about your ex and it became a number one hit, that the entire world sang along to decades later, would that feel like revenge? It would in my book. Or would it just make things awkward forever? All right, y'all. We're going to buzz right along into the next one. That's a pretty crazy story, don't you think? Y'all don't forget to hit that like and subscribe for me, please. Sorry. All righty. Now, we're going to get into the next story. And y'all know this lady, Alanis Morissette. Her song You Oughta Know is the best. So, story time still buzzing. And now we're jumping forward from the 1970s into the 1990s when a young Canadian singer released a song that didn't just become a hit, it detonated like a grenade on rock radio. Because if you were around in 1995, that would be me, you remember the first time you heard You Oughta Know by Alanis Morissette. The song didn't ease its way into your ears. It hit you right in the face. And the reason it hit you so hard is because it sounded like something people usually keep private. And you know what? Maybe she was. And you go, girl. Now, here's what makes this story interesting to me. Okay? Before Jagged Little Pill, Alanis Morissette was not the alternative rock powerhouse people picture today. She had actually released a couple of pop records in Canada when she was a teenager. They were upbeat, dance-style albums, and while they did all right locally, it didn't turn her into a global star. But everything changed when she moved to Los Angeles and began working with producer Glenn Ballard. Suddenly, the writing got deeper. The emotions got sharper instead of trying to sound polished. Alanis started writing songs that sounded honest. And honesty can be powerful, but it can also be uncomfortable. I think we know that one too. When You Oughta Know hit the radio, people immediately noticed how raw the lyrics were. This wasn't a quiet, reflective breakup song. This was someone calling out the emotional wreckage left behind by a relationship. Lines like, and every time you speak her name, does she know how you told me you'd hold me until you died? Unalived, pardon me, you two, made listeners stop and think, wait a minute, who exactly is she talking about? That question sent the media into full detective mode. Suddenly, magazines, radio stations, and fans everywhere were trying to figure out which ex-boyfriend inspired the song. Names started floating around: actors, musicians, comedians. Everybody had a theory. Now, Alanis herself has always been pretty careful about confirming the identity behind the song. And over the years, she's made it clear that the music was never meant to become some public trial for a specific person. But the speculation became part of the cultural movement surrounding the track. And while people debated the mystery, the song itself kept climbing the charts. So Jagged Little Pill exploded. The album sold more than 30 million copies worldwide and became one of the defining records of the 1990s. It was one of my favorites for sure. And a big part of that success came from the emotional honesty that Alanis brought to the music. Because let's be real for a second, for a long time, women in rock were often expected to soften their emotions. Breakup songs were supposed to sound or were sad or poetic. But Alanis Morissette, she came out swinging with anger and sarcasm and frustration instead of apologizing for those emotions. She put them front and center. And millions of listeners, especially young women, heard that song and thought, finally, someone is saying the things we feel but don't always say out loud. That's what made You Oughta Know such a defining moment in rock. And you know what? It wasn't just a hit song, it was a shift in how emotional honesty could sound on the radio. And the funny thing, decades later, the debate around that song still pops up. People still argue about who it was written about. Why? What the lyrics really mean, and whether the anger in the performance was justified or, if it was just part of the artistic expression. Don't matter, really. So let me throw this one to y'all tonight. And if you're out there, leave me a chat. Because, look, I know everybody has an opinion about breakup songs. When an artist writes something that's personal and that raw, do you think it makes the music more powerful? Or do you think some emotions are better left out of the spotlight? Because once a song like that becomes a global hit, that moment in your life is basically frozen in time forever. Our hair, for some reason, that just keeps going in front of my face. It's probably these bangs and it's driving me nuts. Okay, loading up again. Now then, maybe. Hmm. Okay. Alrighty then. Pat Benatar is our next lady of the night. Of this night, anyway. Y'all, story time is still buzzing. Let's just put it that way. We're heading into the early 1980s, a time when rock music was changing fast. MTV had just launched music videos where becoming and they were just becoming as important as the songs themselves. And artists suddenly had a brand new way to tell stories visually. And right in the middle of that moment was one of the most powerful voices in rock music, Pat Benatar. Now, by the time Love is a Battlefield came out in 1983, Pat Benatar was already a force. She had built a reputation as a singer who could absolutely command a stage. Songs like Hit Me With Your Best Shot and Heartbreaker had already proven that women in rock didn't have to stand quietly in the background. See, Pat Benatar had a voice that could cut through a wall of guitars and still make you stop and listen. But Love is a Battlefield became something different. It wasn't just another rock song, it became a cultural movement. Now, the interesting thing about this song is that it actually started out in a very different form. The original version of Love is Battlefield was written as a slower, more traditional ballad. But when Pat Benatar and her producer got hold of it, they completely reimagined the track. They pushed it into a more dramatic, synth driven sound that fit perfectly with the early MTV era. Yeah, it's an error now. Oh, this thing is bothering me. Oh, I think I got it. Okay. Suddenly the song had, yeah, and now my light's all messed up again, isn't it? I hate this stuff. Hello, work please. And it's not working. Ah, that is not it. I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. It's just being stupid. There we go. Suddenly, the song had this energy that felt bigger than just a relationship story. Okay. So then came the music video. If you were watching MTV in the 80s, You definitely remember this one. Instead of a simple performance video, they turned it into a mini movie. The video tells the story of a young woman leaving home, navigating independence, and eventually just standing up for herself. And the people around her, and the line that stuck with everybody was simple but powerful. We are strong. No one can tell us we're wrong. That line hit differently at that time, especially for young women watching MTV who were starting to see themselves represented in rock music in a new way. Now, what makes this song such a perfect story for Women's History Month? At a time when rock music was still heavily dominated by male artists, Pat Benatar was out there delivering an anthem that framed relationships not as something passive, but as something complicated and emotional and sometimes confrontational. Love is a Battlefield wasn't about quietly accepting heartbreak. It was about recognizing the struggle inside relationships and owning your voice within them. The song became one of Pat Benatar's biggest hits and is still one of the most recognizable anthems of the 1980s. And that video helped show the power of storytelling in music way, way before every artist was dropping cinematic video on YouTube, right? But what really makes Pat Benatar's career stand out is how she helped open doors for women in rock during a time when the industry wasn't always eager to hand those opportunities out. She didn't just sing powerful songs. She commanded the stage with the same intensity and authority that male rockers had, well, they'd been known for too. And because of that, a lot of artists who came after her were able to step into. You hear a song. I don't know why my thing keeps doing that. When you hear a song like Love is Battlefield, do you hear it mostly as a relationship anthem, or do you hear it as something bigger, like a message about independence and standing your ground? Because sometimes the songs that last the longest are the ones that mean something slightly different to every person who hears them. Okay, y'all. I'm going to take a little bit break. Before we get to the next one, I shall return. Please enjoy my song.
She came from the quiet storms, built a fire from the ground, turned a whisper to a warning. Now her voice shakes the town. Every setback was a lesson, every doubt became a key, unlocking something bigger. That's the rise of Boss B. When the lights go low, her vision hits high. She built a whole damn network off a promise and a try. Every sunrise, every moment, she's stacking legacy. This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV. Boss B rising, BBTV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dreams, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss B rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's the queen of the comeback, the storm in the stream, crafting stories out of heartbreak. dynasty. Boss be rising, BBTV's igniting, turn the volume up. Yeah, the whole world's invited from the gravel roads to the neon dream. She built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling when she hits go live. Everybody feels it. She's got fire in the head, it's got truth in the frame, got a heart that won't retire and a gift you can't name. Every loop, every letter, every dream she sets free, it's a love note to the world sign. Boss B. And the world keeps watching as the numbers climb, but she's counting all the moments, not the dollar signs. From the late night grind to the daylight scene, she's building something bigger than the algorithm's dream. Boss be rising, BBTV shining, her story's rewriting, a legacy in real time. Boss be rising, BBTV's igniting, turn the volume up. Yeah, the whole world's invited from the gravel roads to the neon dream. She built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling when she hits go live. Everybody feels it. BBTV, where the stories breathe. BBTV, where the dreamers believe. Boss be rising, watch her take her place. This is BBTV, this is her grace.
All right, we are back. Thank you for sticking with me. Now we're going to get into our last three. Hopefully make it last a little bit longer. Let's see here. We have, let me slide again. Joan Jett. Come on, I know y'all love her, right? Story time, still buzzing. And now we're moving into one of the most rebellious success stories in rock history, because sometimes the music industry tells us an artist no. And instead of giving up, that artist decides to build their own door and kick it open themselves. And that is exactly what Joan Jett did. Now, if you know anything about Joan Jett, you already know she has never been the type to sit quietly and wait for permission. She first gained attention in the 1970s as a member of the all-female rock band The Runaways, a group that shocked the music world at the time simply because it was a band of young women playing loud, aggressive rock music. The Runaways developed a cult following, especially overseas, but when the band eventually broke up, Joan Jett found herself in a difficult position. You would think that someone with her stage presence and songwriting ability would immediately land a solo record deal, but that's not what happened. In fact, record labels across the U.S. repeatedly turned her down. Some executives literally told her that a woman fronting a hard rock band just wouldn't sell. No. Imagine hearing that over and over again when you already know exactly what kind of artist you want to be. Now, Here's where the story turns into pure rock and roll determination. Instead of accepting those rejections, Joan Jett and her longtime collaborator, Kenny Laguna, decided to take matters into their own hands. They created their own label and called it Black Heart Records, which at the time was almost unheard of for an artist trying to launch a major rock career. They were literally loading records into the trunk of a car and delivering them to a radio stations themselves. That kind of hustle is the part of this story people sometimes forget when they hear the final song. Because the anthem that would change everything was I Love Rock and Roll. Interestingly enough, Joan Jett didn't originally write the song. She first heard it while touring in England with the Runaways and immediately fell in love with the raw energy of it. When she recorded her own version with the Blackhearts, she leaned all the way into that gritty guitar sound and her unmistakable attitude. The result was a track that sounded like pure rock rebellion. And when that song hit the radio, in 1982, everything changed almost overnight. I Love Rock and Roll climbed all the way to number one on the Billboard charts and stayed there for 7 full weeks. Think about that for a second. The same industry that had rejected her suddenly had one of the biggest rock hits in the country sitting right in front of them, released on a label she built herself. That moment didn't just launch her solo career, it became a symbol of independence for artists everywhere. And that's why this story fits so well into tonight's Women's History Month theme. Joan Jett wasn't just making great music, she was proving that women in rock didn't have to wait for approval from anyone. If the doors weren't open, she was perfectly willing to knock them down herself. And here's the thing that makes I Love Rock and Roll such a lasting anthem. It isn't complicated. It's loud and confident and completely unapologetic. The kind of song you hear once and immediately want to turn up the volume. Decades later, it's still one of the most recognizable rock songs ever recorded. And it all started with someone who refused to let rejection define what she could become. So let me throw this out there to you. When you hear a story like Joan Jett's, where the industry said no again and again before the success, finally came, does that make the victory feel even bigger? I think so. Or do you think moments like that prove that sometimes the people running the industry don't actually know what the fork the audience wants, right? Until it's already happening. So, what do you think? Y'all let me know. Our next segment, we have a couple of beauties. This is a sister duo, and you're going to love it. I hope. I think you know who I'm talking about. Sure you do, Heart, of course. Look, we're heading back into the 70s again. I know I'm going back and forth, but I just have to, okay? Just for a story that proves sometimes the best rock songs come from pure frustration. Because if you've ever heard the opening guitar riff of Barracuda by Heart, you already know it sounds like someone means business, right? That song doesn't creep up slowly. It hits hard right from the first second. And the reason it carries that kind of energy is because it was written out of a moment that made the band absolutely furious. Now, for anyone who might not know the history here, Heart was fronted by sisters Ann Wilson and Nancy Wilson, okay? And by the mid 1970s, they were already making serious waves in rock music. Songs like Magic Man, my favorite, and Crazy on You had established them as a powerful rock band at a time when women leading a hard rock group was still something the industry didn't quite know how to categorize. But, success always attracts attention. And sometimes that attention comes with a lot of nonsense attached to it. At the time, Hart was signed to Mushroom Records, and as the band started getting bigger, the label decided it needed more publicity. Now, publicity stunts in the music business are nothing new, but this particular stunt crossed a line. Someone connected with the label began spreading a rumor that Ann and Nancy Wilson weren't actually sisters, but lovers. Yes, you heard that right. The story was completely false, obviously, but it started circulating in magazines and press coverage as a way to generate attention around the band. Imagine finding out that your record label, the people who you are supposed to or who are supposed to be supporting your career, are pushing a rumor like that just to sell records. Mm. And was talked about how and has talked about how angry and betrayed the band felt when they realized what had happened. And that anger turned directly into music. Of course it did. The next time the band went into the music or into the studio, that frustration came pouring out in the form of Barracuda. If you listen closely to the lyrics, you can hear the attitude immediately. Lines like, "Sell me, sell you," the porpoise said, were a direct jab at the way the music industry sometimes treats artists like products instead of people. The song wasn't just about a personal insult, it was about pushing back against the entire idea that the industry could manipulate their image for profit. Musically, the track matched that energy perfectly. The guitars are sharp and aggressive, the rhythm is relentless, and Anne, her vocal performance sounds like someone who is absolutely done playing nice, right? When Barracuda was released in 1977, just 5 years after I was born, yeah, I'm that old, it quickly became one of Hart's biggest hits and cemented the band's reputation as one of the toughest rock acts of the era. And here's what makes this whole story such a great example of women in rock standing their ground. Instead of quietly ignoring the rumor or letting it fade away, Hart responded with a song that called out the entire system behind it. Barracuda became an anthem of defiance, and over the years, it remained one of the most recognizable songs of the 70s. It also proved something important about Ann and Nancy as artists. They weren't just talented musicians. They were strong enough to take an ugly situation and turn it into a powerful statement through their music. So let me ask you something, guys. When artists face moments like that where the industry tries to control the narrative around them, do you think responding through music is the best kind of revenge? Or do you think sometimes the drama behind a song ends up becoming just as famous as the song itself? That's a good question, huh? All righty, we're going to get into our last little segment here, and it looks like we may not even get through this whole hour before I give it up, because I'll be honest with you, I know what it is. We've had some bad weather all day long, and you know, I just hate it. Okay, so we're going to get our next panel up here. It is Janice. You know how I love my Janice. Little old girl from Texas, just like me. So, for this last segment, we're going back to the 60s, to a woman whose voice didn't just sing rock music. It practically tore the walls down around it. Because when people talk about the pioneers of women in rock, one name always rises right to the top of that conversation, especially for me, and that's Janis Joplin. Y'all know I love my Janis. Now, Janis Joplin wasn't the first woman to sing rock and roll, but the way she did it changed everything. Before Janis became along, or before Janis came along, a lot of female singers in popular music were expected to sound polished and controlled, maybe even a little delicate. Janis Joplin showed up with a voice that sounded like raw emotion poured straight into a microphone. It was gritty and loud, soulful, and completely unapologetic. And when she performed, you could feel every ounce of what she was singing with. And let me tell you, that was every ounce of her heart. Now, by the time that Janis recorded Piece of My Heart with the band Big Brother and the Holding Company, she had already started building a reputation as a performer who could stop an audience in its tracks. So true. But that song became the moment, or I'm sorry, that song became the moment when the rest of the world really started paying attention. Interestingly enough, Janis didn't originally write Piece of My Heart. The song had been recorded earlier by another artist, but when Janis got a hold of it, she transformed it into something completely different. Instead of sounding like a traditional soundtrack, she turned it into a powerhouse rock performance. And if you listen really closely to the way she sings it, you can hear the emotional intensity in every line. When she belts out, "Take another little piece of my heart now, baby," it doesn't sound like someone politely asked for something, for love, you know? It sounds like someone who has given everything they have and still isn't done. Yeah. So that performance helped launch the album Cheap Thrills, which became a massive success and pushed Janis into the spotlight as one of the most electrifying performers of her generation. But what made Janis stand out, it wasn't just her voice, it was the honesty behind it. You know, when she sang about heartbreak or longing, people believed her because she it sounded real. You know, everything about her she put into it. She didn't smooth out the edges. She didn't smooth out her emotions to make them easier to hear. She let them come through exactly as they were. And they were messy. And that kind of authenticity made audiences connect with her in a way that, you know, it was just really rare at the time. So Janis Joplin also helped redefine what women in rock music could look like. She didn't follow the traditional image expectations the industry often placed on female performers. I mean, consider the contrast, okay? Cherry Curry from the Runaways, she wore lingerie. Janis, she wore everything psychedelic she could possibly find, and if she didn't, she'd make it herself. She dressed how she wanted, sang how she wanted, and performed with the same wild energy as any rock frontman of that era. That freedom and individuality became a part of her legend. Even though her career was tragically short, her life included, the impact that she had on rock music is still felt today. Artists across multiple generations have pointed to Janis Joplin as someone who showed up or showed them that emotional honesty could be a strength rather than something to hide. And you know what? When you listen to Piece of My Heart decades later, it is still carrying that same emotional punch. It reminds us that great rock music, it doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from artists who are willing to put everything they feel right out in the open for the whole world to hear. Pardon me, I am parched. I've been talking a lot. Okay, so here's the last question I want to throw at you. When you hear a voice like Janis Joplin's, do you think that that kind of raw emotional power is something that can be taught? Or do you think it's something that only comes from artists who are willing to pour their entire life experience into the music? Personally, I think it's the latter. All right, that's the final story and the final question tonight as we celebrate, the women who helped shape rock history. And they most certainly did. And with grace and style, let me say. All righty. Let me put myself back where I'm supposed to be. Y'all, that brings us to an end tonight. We got 45 minutes in. This has been Jukebox Journey. We do this 3 Saturdays out of the month. The last Saturday is our We Be Jammin' with the Iron Sharpening Iron Universe. So I will see you next weekend for another Jukebox Journey. And I've got to say, this was a fun one because these stories remind us that rock music has never just been about guitars and stage lights. It's about people. It's about moments where artists, take something real from their lives and they turn it into music that millions of people connect with. So tonight we talked about 6 women who each left their mark on rock history in their own way. From Stevie Nicks turning heartbreak into one of Fleetwood Mac's biggest hits, to Alanis Morissette unleashing one of the most brutally honest breakup songs of the 1990s, and Pat Benatar delivering an anthem that still echoes through rock radio decades later. We looked at Joan Jett proving that sometimes the industry is wrong and determination can win anyway. Heart firing back at the music business with one of the most powerful riffs ever recorded, and Janis Joplin showing the world what it sounds like when someone sings with absolutely nothing held back. And that's really the theme behind tonight's show. These women didn't just sing songs. They put their experiences, their emotions, and their voice into the music in a way that changed rock forever. So before we wrap it up, I'll throw one last question out to the chat. When you think about the songs that have stuck with you the longest over the years, do you think it's the sound that keeps them alive or the story behind them? Because sometimes the story behind the music is just as powerful as the songs themselves. Hey, thank y'all for hanging out with me tonight and celebrating Women's History Month. We probably will keep that theme for the next 2 shows since I have 2 more Saturdays before We Be Jammin'. And, diving right into these moments in rock history. Until next time, you guys, I will buzz you later. But hey, before I go, do me a favor. Go check out Tuber Chat. Thanks, guys. Buzz you later.
If you're enjoying this show, subscribing is the easiest way to support what's being built here on BBTV. You'll see the join button right next to subscribe. No pressure, no expectations, just an option for people who want to support the channel in a real way. We're live every day at 3 p.m. Central now. And don't worry, we didn't change the heat, just the clock. And if you've got a story you want to share, send it in. Anonymous is always fine.
I want to take a minute to shout out Tuber Chat. If you're a creator who's tired of surface-level advice, and actually wants to understand how YouTube works, that's the space. It's real conversations with real creators who are in the trenches, building channels, testing ideas, No posturing, no gatekeeping, no fake guru energy, just people sharing what's working, what isn't, and why.
If you're serious about growing, learning, and not doing this alone, check out Tuber Chat. The link is in the description.
A boss be rising.